Welcome back to the Magic Sponge Podcast, a miracle cure for all your rugby league injury issues. I'm Brien. I'm the guy behind all the NRL Physio content you see on social media. Co-host James is here. Mate, you guys got the 2 points. The Bronx this week being on the bye probably came at a good time with Reece Walsh and those kind of guys going down. How was your week, mate? Have a good one. Let's not talk about the Finns.
Yeah, they got handled up in Bundaberg there, up in the Wide Bay region, the poor old Dolphins. But no, not a big week for me, Brian. I sort of had a couple of days off work. I was nursing adenovirus, so I'm just collecting all the viral strains from daycare like passport stamps at the moment, mate. It's my passport is chock-a-block full of the contagious things that float around via my children. So yeah, hopefully as the weather gets warmer, because we had a belter of a weekend, then I can dodge that moving forward and I can be fully healthy come finals time in the footy.
Yeah, mate, I am hurting today. We had a work function last night, and it definitely didn't get too loose or too late, I would say. But I just come to the realization time and time again that just dad drinking, it just costs too much the next day. I think, like I just think there's got to only be a few situations in the year where you really unload because today, I wasn't too dusty last night, but yeah, just all day today on a Sunday, things around the house, kids going everywhere. And my wife is wonderful and, really leans in and helps me out when she knows I'm hurting a little bit, but the kids don't really care. And yeah, I think that's my lesson for the listeners this week is if you're a dad, or maybe most dads would probably already know this, but I'm just learning it more and more as time goes on. I'm sure you're the same, mate.
Yeah, it always is like that, isn't it? You don't get any reprieve from the children. They can almost sense it, can't they? When dad's a bit wounded that they don't want to do much time on the floor where you want to spend your time. It's more let's get up and get outdoors is how it normally operates in my house, hey.
Oh, mate, it's good fun. All right, guys, straight into it. We are, as always, on YouTube. Please head on over there, subscribe, review, and give us a thumbs up. It helps get us in front of more eyeballs. This is where you get all your injury analysis in the NRL. Come here every week, and we'll cover all the in-game injuries, review the big injury and rehab news from the week, and we'll loop it all back to SuperCoach and Fantasy. We're getting to the business end, so if you're right up the tippity top, you're shooting for that $50,000 prize. Something on this show might just get you over the edge in over the top in terms of getting that edge. If you get value out of this content, patreon.com/NRL Physio. There's even more stuff going on over there. I cover all the injuries in depth. There's the weekly casualty ward where every injured player is wrapped. And yeah, we've got the chat function going on over there too. So answer any questions as the week goes through. But otherwise, let's get straight into the injury wrap for round 24, which is brought to you by Pain Pod, drug-free pain relief that anyone can use.
I don't know exactly what he's done. I would have thought it was an ankle, but I'm just guessing.
He shouldn't be out for a long period of time. I mean, I'm no doctor. We have to wait for the scans, obviously, but that'd be more positive than negative.
Rightio, here's the round 24 injury wrap. So to start off with HIAs, the two most fantasy relevant players here for the HIAs, Brian, is Cody Walker from the Bunnies, Connor Watson from the Roosters, and then Grant Anderson is the final name on the list tonight from the Storm. I guess probably for the fantasy enthusiasts, Connor Watson's probably the most rostered, or maybe Cody is. I don't know. They're probably 50-50 there, aren't they?
Well, I'm a Cody Walker owner, and if I've spoken about my Max Plath to Angus Crichton trade as being one of the worst that I've made this season, the second worst. Oh, well, maybe Isaac Tungo, bringing him in was the worst. But somewhere in the top three is going to Cody Walker from why is his name leaving
Lockie Galvin.
me? Yeah, Lockie Galvin. Like that has
Lockie
cost
Galvin
me.
for Dally M, by the way. Getting in for Dally M.
Just horrible. Horrible. So I'm a Cody Walker owner, as I'm sure many of you are. He was category 1, so he definitely can't play next week. I had someone ask me, I think at some point, like, why did I put in my post that Cody Walker won't play next week, and then Connor Watson is very unlikely to play next week. As always, Connor Watson, I believe, I could be wrong, but they termed it like he failed his HIA. I didn't hear any like category 1 stuff for Connor Watson. So I'm assuming category 2 potentially. Sorry if I got that wrong, but effectively that's where I've gone with my posts these days is if they're category 2, I say very unlikely because until 2 weeks ago, it just had only happened like once or twice, and then it happened twice in a week. But yeah, it's very unlikely because Category 2, you can challenge the 11-day stand down. But Grant Anderson and Cody Walker, they both won't play next week because they were Category 1.
Righto, it might be sort of trade out time, I'd say, Brian, if you got any trades up your
Yes,
sleeve at
all
this
those
end of the
trades. Yep.
season. So I would be definitely moving on those ones if you got a few boosts up your sleeve as well, maybe, if you're holding on to them for deep into the season. First game of the round was the Panthers v Storm, Brian. So big one out of here for the Panthers, the triple premiers, looking for 4 in a row. Nathan Cleary looks like a shoulder subluxation injury. I haven't heard really too much news about this apart from it sounds like they're going to manage it non-operatively and hope that he will return come finals time. But it's going to be one that all the Panthers fans are going to be probably a little bit apprehensive about, aren't they?
Yeah, rightfully so. I think there's a lot of interesting stuff that's come out about this. So obviously we had the injury occur. One of the first things I think most people noticed is that that shoulder was strapped up. You kind of noticed it was peeking out underneath the jersey there. Straight off the bat, I think I had a few people kind of saying, "Oh, like he's done the same shoulder because it's strapped, so that must be the one that he's done previously." But then, kind of, we all realize no, it's the left. The last time was the right, and sort of going, "Oh, it's strange that he's got it strapped." But they said post game, obviously, that this is something where he first subluxed it in the preseason. He has then had recurrent issues with that shoulder. They said he took the time off with his hamstring to try and sort out his shoulder as well, which this just comes down to this wonderful thing about how good would it be if we kind of, had some sort of access to this as fans. Like, I totally understand why they wouldn't put this information out there, Penrith, because, like the competitive advantage on having opposition think that Nathan Cleary is 100% fit and well is so valuable. But yeah, it would have been great from our perspective, particularly as, like fans and SuperCoach and fantasy players and all that kind of stuff. Not that you probably would have majorly changed your Nathan Cleary thing, but I think, once again, it just goes to show how much stuff is going on behind the scenes that we never, we as fans never find out about. So, so had the injury, has gone and got scans. It's shown no significant damage and the key word is immediate surgery is not required. So no immediate surgery, but I think you can pretty much read into it that he's more than likely going to have surgery postseason, because the thing that I noted at the time and what concerned me the most was how, I guess in inverted commas, easy it came out. So it didn't take like a big land on an outstretched shoulder. A few people sort of speculated that it was the Storm player had wrapped his hand around and pulled. But if you go back and have a look, he pulls on the trap effectively, or he's around the base of the neck. There's no pulling on the actual shoulder joint itself. That Penrith had no issue with the tackle themselves, so they got specifically asked about it, and they said they had no issues as well. So it was the fall onto the outstretched arm, and then as he was struggling, he went sort of back, the weight shifted back forward through the shoulder, and that's when he really seemed to go. The fact that it was so easy for that to happen does concern me that, it's inherently a bit unstable and will need to be fixed up, because where we're going now is obviously he's not going to play for the rest of the regular season. Finals week 1 is 4 weeks from the injury, which look is a pretty good time frame. Like I say 2 to 6 weeks is a usual recovery range. But your 2-week ones are probably first-time subluxations where there's minimal damage. It doesn't look too bad. I'm sure Cleary probably the first time he did it might have been a quick turnaround. But here, because he's done it quite a few times now, it came out quite easily. 4 weeks, they're going to need every day of those 4 weeks to kind of sort him out, because the big concern here moving forward is that re-injury risk. It's up to, it's a more than 50% of especially young males. young males who have a shoulder instability events, that's either a subluxation or a dislocation, more than 50%, if they don't have surgery, will go on to have further instability in that shoulder. So yeah, there's a high risk of re-injury. Now, he's done it before where he did it with his right shoulder. He had much more significant damage in 2021. He got through the final series and they won the comp. Jahream Bula was another one. He kind of got through it a little bit, like obviously didn't finish the grand final, had to come off and was a bit of a passenger. So it just shows you that the range is so wide with these, in that, yeah, he could get out there, have one bad fall or one sort of tackle that goes the wrong way and his shoulder goes. It's just the threshold's going to be a lot lower. So for Penrith fans, I think, yeah, like you definitely, there should be some concern there. The fact that it's worked for him in the past doesn't mean it's going to work for him in the future. It comes down to a lot of luck. What situations does he get himself into? He's going to be working on a lot of, and we spoke about it on the pod, I think a couple of years ago, about how he was practicing how to fall. Like you could see, I think when he came back in 2022, he was very purposely falling away from like outstretched arm to try and avoid that. So yeah, I just think it's a really interesting, obviously it's the biggest injury situation of this week. And moving forward into the finals, it really is a little bit of a ticking time bomb, in that it's only going to take one wrong move and that threshold for the shoulder coming out, where for a normal person it would be quite significant. You'd need quite a significant trauma or mechanism of injury for the shoulder to come out. For Cleary, it's not going to take much. So they're going to have to strap it really well. Painkiller injections aren't all that useful here because it's quite deep. It's more about stability and making sure you avoid that re-injury risk. So yeah, James, I mean, if you're a Penrith fan, or if you're somebody who is a fan of Nathan Cleary outside of that, how do you reckon you'd be feeling going into the NRL finals?
Yeah, certainly apprehensive. I agree with you on that one, Brian. I think it really blows open the competition maybe for a different premier this year. So I think obviously we want to wish Nath all the best and hopefully he gets through everything and can be a part of their, finals endeavour. But I think I speak for most footy fans in saying that we're kind of sick of Penrith winning. So if we could see a different grand finalist, that wouldn't be badly appreciated from that point of view. I'm still a bit bitter from last year, Brian. Probably not the best person to ask for that one. I've still got a bit of trauma there I need to work through. Manly versus Warriors is next. So, favourite of the show, Tommy Talau has been diagnosed with a pec strain. I haven't heard severity of that, Brian, but that could make or break my week about the severity of that, what the results are there. The other ones we've got on our list here, Tom Trbojevic with a pec cork. That's not looking like it's going to be serious. They're not anticipating him to be missing. And then the last one was Gordon Chan Kum Tong with an AC joint sprain. Do you want to give us the good news or the bad news about Tommy Talau, Brian? I'm sort of crossing my fingers here about good news for Tommy.
Now, before I go to your love interest, I will just say, because I know it's a question I had a bit about Nathan Cleary, I'm relatively confident that he'll be fine for week 1 of finals. Like 4 weeks is a pretty good turnaround. So I would be surprised if he doesn't play week 1. I just forgot to get that in my long rant. So apologies for that. But more importantly, Tommy Talau, the pec strain, mate, it didn't look fantastic. They kind of said he's going to have to get a scan and they think there might be a small tear there. Didn't look like a rupture. So hopefully that is the case. But, even a pec strain minor, you're probably looking at 2 to 4 week return to play. So I'm still hopeful that we'll get him back before finals and he can go on a massive run to potentially win like winger of the year at the Dally M's, as he probably deserves, coming from, mate. I still can't believe you, after Simo's call of Vasako last year, your call of Tommy Talau, it's just paid dividends. I'm falling behind in the hot take stakes because
no pressure for next year, mate.
He's killing it. But Gordon Chan Kum Tong with the AC joint sprain, he'll get it needled. He might have to miss a few weeks if it is high grade, but he'll be back this season playing with painkilling injections. Tommy Turbo with the pec cork, not much to be concerned about there. He just copped a knock to the pec, looked a bit sore. He would have been sore for the next 48 hours after that, but no concerns with him moving forward.
Yeah, with Tommy Trbojevic in particular, I guess with the pec cork, They do have a shorter turnaround to the West Tigers on a Thursday night this week, but I still think he's the most likely VC option you've got in your squad if you have Tom Trbojevic there. He's probably a bit of a no-brainer to put the VC on for next week for those playing along at
Wouldn't
home.
be against a
Uh,
straight C, would you? Surely.
well, probably not.
Like if
It
you've got a
depends. Like I've
bad
got,
auto emergency, I wouldn't mind just
I
going
don't.
straight Tommy Turbo.
It depends if Ruben Porter gets a run, then I've got a bad auto
Yeah.
emergency. But at the moment, I sort of don't really have anyone that's diabolical, especially with Cleary out. I won't have too many people I can reserve. Like Bryce Cartwright will probably be in my AE, I think, if everything goes to plan, or it might be a Casey McLean, which again is probably not. Well, depends.
I
It depends
think
on what sort of
Penrith have
week
got
you
a
get for
good
Casey
matchup
McLean.
next week. I think
They've got
Penrith
the
are good.
Raiders.
Yeah.
So not the best, not the worst, but Casey McLean's been sort of a bit up and down as you'd expect from an outside back. So probably not the worst AE to wear from that point of view. He's still going to play AE anyway, isn't he, Brien? So he's probably not the worst. Worst go there. We'll move forward to the Roosters versus the Eels next, Brien. No injuries out of this one to speak on. So we'll move to the Bulldogs v the Dolphins up there at lovely Bundaberg. Heck of a place to go in the world. One of the best cane spirits you'll ever find up there in Bundaberg as well, by the way. Friends of the show. Josh Curran out of this one, I guess we all saw it on the screen. He was touch and go with an AC joint injury. He was favouring that during the course of the game as well. Probably going to be one to watch in terms of minutes moving forward there, Brian, for people that have Josh Curran in their front row or second row.
Yeah, I think it's really lucky for the Supercoach owners of Josh Curran that the Dogs are like real touch and go for that top four, because they can't. I don't think they can afford to rest him. It did look pretty nasty. It looked like he was in a fair bit of pain, but we know with AC joint issues like rib issues, yeah, like you can be in significant amounts of pain, but those lovely pain killing injections this time next week, potentially he'll feel a lot better. But I think the big thing here is, I always say with middle forwards playing through AC joint sprains, playing through rib cartilage issues, for someone like me who has no trades, is really scraping the bottom of the barrel, I'll take any points I can get at this point in time. But if you're in a luxury position where you don't need to rely on Josh Curran, yeah, I just wouldn't, because I think there is a massive risk of reduced minutes, of suffering an aggravation in game and needing to come straight off. Phil Gould did say, friend of the show, Phil Gould said that they weren't concerned about him, that he's just playing through some pain and will have to continue to do so. I don't think Zeus, old Maxi King, will be back next week. I think it's probably the week after or the week after that he's more likely. So I wonder whether they just try and get Joshy Curran through next week until Max King comes back and then kind of roll from there. But yeah, I just think if you're an owner of Josh Curran and you have other options at that front row who you're kind of tossing up in between, you're like, oh, Josh is, pretty good, pretty close to this other person. Like I've got Terrell May, for example, and JWH is back next week. So that's a real toss up, but I'm probably going to go with someone like Terrell May, because he just doesn't, like, he's probably got, 25, 30 point downside with minutes and stuff like that. But yeah, Josh Curran could cop a knock and be gone after 5 minutes. So I just think, I like in a situation like that, I'll probably play Terrell May, which maybe will shock a few people. Where would you sit on, say, who else is there? Samuel Afinu versus Curran versus Terrell May moving forward with
Yeah.
this?
So I honestly think we have the same front row setup, Brian, because I've got Max King still. I've got Curran, I've got Finu and Terrell May. So I'm probably leaning your way as well, as going Terrell May and Finu in my front row setups, which I don't think is a super spicy take. Like, I don't know what Josh Curran put up this week. What did he put up this week from memory, Brian? It was in the 40s, wasn't it?
I
From
think
memory,
something
it was
like
just
that.
a little bit down on points there.
Yeah, 46.
And he's noticeably favouring it towards the end of the game as well. There, so especially on that charge down when he sort of ran through and he had a few second efforts there, that he was noticeably favouring it. I would definitely use a trade there if you could, probably for someone with a bit more upside. Like I guess Joey Tarpanay is looking pretty good. And Phil Blake's always it always looks a bit damaging there. Mitchy Barnett still keeps pumping out big scores. He's probably a little bit out of reach in terms of price, but I think it's not a bad shout to move off Josh Curran if possible, even though he's done a heck of a job all year. Or if you can rotate him through a dual position second row for a week or two, you might want to do that as well, potentially just to start a couple of other players. Anything else for Josh Curran there, Brian, or we'll move on?
Move on. Yeah, I think that's all good.
Cowboys, Cowboys Raiders is next. Cowboys, I don't understand this team, Ryan. I don't know if they're good or not. I really don't get it. They're the one of the most bizarre football teams to follow along with. They're pretty much going to make the 8 though, because they're sitting 7th at the moment. They've got the bye next week, so they're guaranteed 2 points. So they can't really get run down by too many teams that I can see. But it was a bizarre old game up there in Townsville. When they can turn it on, they can turn it on. The injury out of this one that we've got is Reece Robson with a hamstring concern. Have you heard too much more on that, Brian?
It didn't look like much. To be honest with you, it was a bit dicey as to whether there was even a hamstring concern. Like, he did come off and seemed to be at least not 100%, but he ran off the field and he was running around sort of prior to it. So you'd assume, if anything, minor strain, 2 to 4 week return to play. They've got the bye next week. So I'd say in most cases, he's probably going to be right for their round 26 game is my thought this time. I haven't had any confirmation, but yeah, that's kind of where I'm leaning at this point in time.
Yeah, it's probably a fairly good guess on that one, I'd say, Brian, as well. We'll move on to the Tigers v Bunnies here next. So out of this one, Jahream Bula was ruled out pre-game because he underwent shoulder reconstruction surgery, so that ended his year a little bit prematurely there for the Tigs. The other one that they lost to injury out of this game was Fonua Pole as well, with a knee concern. I didn't see mechanism there for Fonua Pole there, Brian. What do we see mechanism-wise?
Mate, I was at the work function last night, so I completely
Yeah.
missed this. I probably would have gone off early if I had seen this live and posted about it. It is as non-contact gets, hey? And he's kind of in a tackle, and he steps once and then steps twice, like that kind of deceleration, plant, and then just sharp, like grabs at the knee, just your typical like ACL-y kind of thing. And I was looking at it tonight going, oh my God, like what just happened? But he got cleared to return. They went in, they assessed him, strapped him up, and they said, yeah, he's free to return if need to. Now, he didn't return, but yes, I'm assuming like a meniscus kind of issue potentially. Like, potentially he's had a PCL injury there in the past. He's got a bit of instability and probably maybe jammed up his meniscus a little bit. But the fact that like, as we spoke about many times before, those hands-on tests for ACL injuries are really, really accurate. So the fact that the Tigers have cleared him to return, it makes me quite confident that he hasn't damaged anything major there. So yeah, still, potentially there's a small meniscus tear in there, which can still be sharp. It can still be non-contact, a bit of rotation, that kind of thing. So like that could still need 4 to 6 weeks and potentially season over. We've seen their approach with Jahream Bula, guys who, might need surgery for things. They're just getting them in because they're like, well, we want to avoid the spoon, but we also don't want these young players who are the future of our club to be playing through these things. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I mean, if I was a betting man, I'd say that Fonua Pole could do with the rest of the season off if there is some sort of knee issue there, but it'll be it'll be interesting to see what comes back considering the mechanism versus what they said out of the game. And then Jahream Bula, the shoulder reco, he'll be fine for round 1 next year. 3 to 5 months usually for most shoulder recos. There was some suggestion. I think the Tigers said that he suffered it last weekend in the Knights, but I had a few Tigers fans telling me that he'd been dealing or he looked like he was favouring it for quite a few weeks. So just shows you, there's those, those instability events can happen for weeks and players just keep playing through them.
Yeah, I guess that's a bit of a blow for the Tigers there, Brian. I don't know if you're aware of this, but in round 27, it's actually going to be West Tigers versus the Eels for the spoon, effectively, because the Tigers are going to get a bye, and they're probably going to be on similar points. So in round 27, it's going to be like the ultimate toilet bowl.
Spoon bowl.
It's going to be spoon bowl, like 17-16. I've got to say, I'm nearly more keen for that than all the other matchups in round 27. I think that could be an absolute blockbuster of like ultimate bottom eight footy. I reckon that could be very, very, very good. We'll move on to the next game, Brian, of the week there. Dragons v Titans. Nothing out of that one to speak of. So we'll go to Sharks v Knights. Kayal Iro was ruled out pre-game with illness. Jayden Berrell had an elbow hyperextension, and Tyson Gamble from the Knights broke a hand. I guess Jayden Berrell, did he feature in this game just gone, Brian? I can't remember.
Yeah, I think he. That's a good question. I had him down as the elbow hyperextension, and it was an aggravation. So he
Oh, that's right. He
actually
did play today, actually.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I do
So he
remember now.
had so he had the elbow hyperextension that he was strapped up for, and it shows you that those elbow hyperextensions can look pretty nasty. But yeah, so he's done it again. Like, yeah, it's not going to be long. Like, he'll be available for them, but you'd assume with Nico and those kind of guys coming back in the weeks ahead, Trindle hopefully being available for them as well, that Jayden Berrell won't be a pivotal part of or someone that they need to start big minutes week in and week out. But I doubt it keeps him out long. Kayal Iro, I just wanted to answer that because I had a lot of people asking if you haven't come across this yet. Yeah, illness. There are a few guys, I think, from the Sharks who got ruled out with illness pre-game. And then Tyson Gamble, broken hand. It was a really strange one, actually. I went back to try and find the mechanism. Couldn't really see anything too crazy. But when Ronaldo Mulitalo scored his, like that final try, it was almost like Gamble went over, like if anybody's interested, because I'm a sicko and I do like this kind of stuff, but he like went over, I don't know, to like either pick up the Knights player who made the tackle. And it was almost like he put his hand out. He hadn't really noticed it before then and kind of grabbed the player and went to pull the player up and then like kind of went, oh, geez, and like grabbed his hand and motioned to the trainer like straight away. So I'm assuming he didn't break his hand trying to help someone up, from the ground or anything like that, and something's happened back on the field. But yeah, it just shows you maybe potentially some adrenaline going, didn't feel anything, and then just got it in that moment. But yeah, in the hand, there's so many different bones. 3 to 6 weeks is a pretty accurate time frame for most of those fractures, though.
Might be another change for the Knights halves there, potentially, Brian. That's been musical chairs in those positions more than any other club. The last thing we're going to do in the NRL stakes here is update the Broncos. So Reece Walsh with a metacarpal fracture and Payne Haas with his Liz Frank injury there, Brian. What's the news for the Broncos fans who tune into this of the weekly with those two guys?
Yeah, I think the Bronx have come out and said that they're both aiming, Walsh and Haas will be back this year. That's kind of what they're aiming for. Walsh, that's not a surprise. Like a metacarpal fracture, unless there's some sort of soft tissue involvement like tendon, which is quite rare for metacarpal fractures, you're not going to see an extended recovery time for these. We have seen players return in 2 weeks. So when I say return in 2 weeks, it means suffer the injury, have a week off and return on that second week, which is potentially, what Walsh could achieve this weekend, next weekend, with the bye being the week that he missed. But in saying that, I think the Bronx have come out and said that they're aiming for the week after as the option. Now, that might sound a little bit crazy for a lot of people. We're talking about a fractured hand. How is he coming back so quickly? Funnily enough, it's often the fact that they have surgery allows them to return so quickly because the surgery is quite a simple one. You put the plate in. It depends on the type of fracture. So what I mean by that is if it's just like I guess the best way to put it, if it's like a small crack in the bone or even a clean crack, right through, you're just having to put a plate and pins in that. It stabilizes it really well, and guys can accelerate their rehab process so they can start moving that those joints in that bone a lot quicker because that plate really stabilizes it. If it's more a complex fracture, multiple pieces, maybe a spiral fracture, something like that, that complicates things a little bit more because you might need a little bit more hardware in there to hold everything together. You have to be a bit more careful with it. But I think the Broncos have been on record as saying that they're aiming for round 26. But yeah, I guess I'm coming on here to tell you that it's absolutely conceivable that he could play next week. I think they'll try and push him to play this week purely because they're right on the edge of it. But it of the historically it's like, I think it's just less than 20% have returned in 2 weeks. Most are around that 3 to 4 week mark. I mean, we've seen Jayden Campbell, he returned in 3 weeks this year, and Joey Manu, he returned in 4, but he had 2. He had 2 of those fractures. So yeah, it just shows you that 3 to 4 weeks is pretty stock standard. So I'd say they're going to push pretty hard for 3 weeks, but it's not out of the question for this week. So maybe an extended bench situation for Reece Walsh potentially. And then Payne Haas with a Liz Frank injury. I think I said last week I was surprised that they were thinking about bringing him back. I still am a little bit surprised, but I guess I probably hadn't wrapped my head around. I thought the Bronx were pretty cooked in terms of making the 8. I think they're still pretty cooked because the Dragons would have to lose 2 of their next 3, I think, for sure, for the Bronx to have any chance, and you're relying on a whole lot of different stuff. So yeah, like Payne Haas, I don't think he'll play this week. He's a potential for around 26 or 27. I picked him up in a few leagues where I'm hopeful I'll make the grand finals in round 26 for draft purposes. So potentially you can get him back then, but yeah, he's the one for me where I'm just like, oh man, Liz Frank injuries, you just don't want to muck around with them. I mean, a metacarpal fracture for Reece Walsh is neither here nor there. You're not overly stressed about pushing a guy with that, but pushing a guy with a Liz Frank injury, I think that's a real that is a real risk versus reward conundrum for the Bronx. So yeah, I mean, you're a Bronx fan, mate. What would you do? Obviously, we don't know, the specific nature of the Liz Frank injury by any means, but what would you feel most comfortable with Payne Haas, knowing that there is that slight chance of a reward of making the finals versus what you know about Liz Frank injuries and what they can, I guess, do to people?
The only scenario I'd put out there, Brian, would be if they're got to win in round 27 and they can make it in. That would be the only scenario. If anything happens and the cards fall as they fall, and it says, no, Broncos can't win, or we're mathematically there, but you got to have like 10 different things lined up, I just wouldn't be expecting him to suit up again this year. I think if it was round 27, so Broncos have got the Eels, into the Finns, into the Storm. The only thing there would be, last round of the season, maybe the Storm are resting heaps. Maybe you don't need to play Payne either. Maybe they get in with relatively full strength if the Storm drop a few players there. I'm not really too sure how they're going to do it and how they're going to sort of rest through that period. The Storm, I guess, Craig Bellamy generally gives those guys the week if he does need them. So yeah, I don't know. That's a tricky one, isn't it? Because you got the Storm in the final round. They're running first by a couple of wins. They're probably, and they got the Dolphins next as well, so they're probably going to win that. The Storm, I'd assume. No offense there, Brian. Obviously directed your way as a Finns fan, but it's hard to make an argument to see Payne suit up for that final round of the year, if at all. I just I just
I
don't
feel
think the
exactly the
reward's
same.
necessarily there,
Yeah.
to be fair.
Yeah, I feel exactly the same. I think that scenario where it's like round 27, we know our fate. If we win this, we're in. I
Yep.
think that is a scenario where like the reward is absolutely worth the risk. But other than that, like obviously if it's the most minor of minor, but as we've said, very rarely do you go see a specialist for the most minor of minor. So yeah, I just think that round 27 scenario is I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, it just makes it very interesting because the Broncos have a better points differential than the Dragons. So if they can get the same amount of points, they can get in, but they're 4 points back at the moment with 3 rounds left. It'd be an almighty Dragons bed shit to get through and in there. And really, with the season they've had, the Broncos don't really deserve to be there. So I think if the football gods have their way, there will be the Dragons into the finals for 2024. So that looks like the wrap up for the injuries in the NRL, Brian. We'll just quickly wrap the NRLW because there's a few players here that are of interest. So Jess Sergis with a knee injury, Talei Holmes with a neck injury, Monalisa Soliola with a shoulder, Jasmine Fogafini with a shoulder, and then we've got Racing McGregor, Jesse Southwell, Tyler King, and Bobby Law, all with concussions there as well. Who do you want to detail a little bit more for the NRLW, especially for the mixer enthusiasts?
Yeah, I think Jess Sergis is the big one. She had the knee injury last week, still scored a try after suffering it. We said you never know with MCL injuries. She was seen in a brace this week. I've heard through unconfirmed sources that she's facing at least a couple of weeks on the sideline. So it's not going to be like a 1 week and then back. So like the use of the brace would usually mean like potentially a grade 2 injury, grade 2 to 3 injury. I'd be thinking grade 2 potentially. I'm not sure if she's still in the brace though, is probably the big thing. I haven't seen any photos from her at the game today. So it'd be interesting if she's out of the brace there, then you're thinking like 1 to 3 week return to play. If she's still in the brace, it's going to be, 3 to 6 weeks. So a little bit longer as well. So be interesting to see what comes back there. But if she's named to return from a mixer perspective, I wouldn't be shying away from her. An MCL injury is a contact injury in nature. It doesn't really limit performance all that much when athletes are ticking those return to play boxes. So not too stressed. Talei Holmes with the neck. I was quite concerned when I went to check this one. I'm not sure if you saw it, James, but it was like a hyperflexion style injury. The good news is that she, when I say hyperflexion, chin to chest. Chin to chest and then load, like she landed on her head with her chin to her chest. So the good news was she moved all her extremities after it happened. So she moved both her arms, both her legs. That was something like obviously people automatically go to like an Alex McKinnon kind of situation. Alex didn't move his arms or his legs after that. So hopefully she went off to hospital afterwards, hopefully just precautionary. But thoughts with her friends and family. Hopefully everything's okay there. Monalisa Soliola looked like a shoulder dislocation. Jasmine Fogavini, there wasn't really a mechanism. And then of the 3 concussions, I think Jessie Southwell was a Cat 1, so she won't play next week. And then Racine McGregor had a massive swelling on her cheekbone. So I would suspect that there's a fracture there. So she might be facing more than just the 11 days with a 4 to 6 weeker with a cheekbone fracture.
Really nicely summarised, Brian. We're going to go straight to the Patreon questions now. So that wraps up all the injuries. Patreon.com/NRL Physio if you want to get these questions answered. Let's get straight into it, Brian. So question 1 is about, what do you make of the new concussion treatment devices and the cleats that claim to prevent ACL injuries as well, Brian? What do you make of those things? I haven't seen the concussion treatment device. I have seen the new footy boots, though, that do claim some pretty outlandish things about preventing like all lower quadrant injuries.
Mate, are you telling me that I get to tell you about this new concussion treatment device and you didn't see it for the first? Like,
No,
I
I
get
never
to
seen
see
it.
your
No.
live reaction. This is
Yes.
this is fantastic. I can't wait. So James, Manly came out this week, and they've been trialing a cold pack headgear that they put on players after they suffer concussion. So it's literally like a headgear that has game readies that pump the cold through. It pumps cold through on the head, and it's to help with symptoms and look, like I want to say, and I think people misunderstand because they think that I just I shit on all these things for no reason. Like, why do you hate that these people are trying to make concussion, help with concussions? And I'll say it on record again. Like, nothing would make me happier than for this device to work. Nothing would make me happier. But there's just so many of these things. And we'll talk about the cleats in a second, which are totally could not be more like this. Is that there's so many companies out there who just claim this stuff before it's evident that it happens. So there's so many things that in theory, if you tell me about a product, I'm like, oh yeah, that sounds like it could work. That makes sense. But then you go and you perform studies on people who you are like, yeah, this would work. And you do great studies, like double-blinded studies are fantastic because the people who run the study are blind to whether they're using the real product or a sham product. And all of the participants are blind. They don't know whether they're getting the sham. So it's like the whole sugar pill thing. They don't know if they're getting a sugar pill or the real medicine. And then we can see, does this work? But there's so many products where they make sense in theory and then they just don't work. For whatever reason, it just actually, when you put it in practically, it doesn't work. So for companies to come out and kind of say, yeah, we're doing this and it works and blah, 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 and then you go and look at the evidence and there's not actually fantastic evidence for it, that is a problem because it starts to get down that path of like taking advantage. And I talk about it all the time with headgear, where I'm like, if they claim that they are reducing concussion risk by wearing headgear, that is taking advantage of parents and kids who are like, yeah, like this is great. I've got this device where I can go. I'm like, I know a lot of the times there would be good intentions at times, but there also is that money driver and that, I'm just going to promise the world, even though I don't have that there. So I've got no problems with anyone who is trying to help with concussion. So this company trying to help with concussion, fantastic. Really, really happy that they're doing it. I just don't like it when companies come out and claim things when there's not that evidence. Like this company, for example, James, I went to their website and also because I do get people comment at times that like I seem to think that I know everything and that I've done all the research and all that kind of stuff. For so much of this stuff, like we've had Dr. Al on the show, who is a neuroscientist down in Melbourne. I hope it's neuroscientist. But I go straight to him for so many things. Like I don't tend to form my own opinion for so many of these things straight off the bat because I seek out people. I'm like, you work in this area, let me know. What do you think? And that like it was really, I guess, enlightening to see that the studies were 2 studies run by the company effectively, which showed really good results. And one of them was a study where like I think it was 3 of the 5 authors had to declare conflict of interest because they were directly employed by the company or associated with the company. So that's never good. And then there was a couple of rat studies as well, and we all know we love our rat studies. So it's just one of those things. I know I seem like I shit on all these things, but it's just like if they came out and they said, "Hey, we've got this device. We're hoping it'll work. Like we're just trying it out with concussion. We'll see how it goes." But like even hearing things, James, like at the press conference, one of the things was, "Oh, well, the players feel really good after they use it." And I'm like, that could not be more placebo-y if you tried. Like I don't want it. Like I know feeling good is good, but you and I know as physios that feeling good after using a product that you're told will help you with something more often than not holds very little water. It's like, give me some measurables, give me something that it actually helps with. Don't just tell me that it makes you feel good, because making you feel good, for example, if they feel better than they actually are, they could return too early from a concussion when their brain isn't fully healed yet because they feel good, because they've got that placebo effect. They're feeling good. So that's the danger behind that. Look, James, I know I'm loving your facial expressions down the other end there, and I won't rant too long, but yeah, cold headgear. Hopefully it works. I seriously hope it is the thing that just beats concussion to a pulp. But let's just wind it back on being like it definitely helps.
Yeah, and I think you've hit on all the key points there that just describe scientific rigor, Brian. It's not just like I can produce this study that can say whatever I want. It's actually pull it apart, break it down. Let's see if it actually stacks up and, the evidence is there in favor of this over doing nothing at all. For example, I think like there's one bloke who coins this topic pretty well there. His name's Professor Ian Harris. If you're ever interested, if you're a bit of a nerd, he is a professor in orthopedic surgery, and he's got like this theory to do with a few of the surgeries that we still keep doing day in and day out about. He calls it like tooth fairy research, which I quite like the term, because he's like, you could do studies that find correlations between what tooth was taken out, what tooth was left under the pillow, what day of the week it was, how much money they got. And you could present all these different scientific things as to why teeth correlate with money, correlate with day of the week, without actually determining does tooth fairy exist or not. So you sort of like, you jump in the gun on actually understanding, does this intervention actually serve the purpose that it's designed to do? So does this intervention manage concussion better? And you've got to just actually establish that before you look into that any further. And I guess those things, that's where, you know, your study design, particularly when you're doing, like you said, randomized control trials, when you're controlling for placebo or you're controlling for intervention, you're objectively measuring things. That's what you need in these scenarios there. And that probably speaks to the cleats sort of discussion in as well, but there, Brian, I'd say.
Yeah, so I'll say two things about, so the concussion device I do find interesting because like cold therapy, I think from our perspective as physios, a lot of things are moving away from cold therapy as being like something that legitimately helps quite a bit. They're like, what they're finding is it really doesn't do a whole lot to tissue. Like it doesn't penetrate very far. Like in terms of the cold, it doesn't do enough to do what you want it to do. And then like using it on your head where you've literally got your skull between the ice and your brain. Like it does lower temperature, which I guess is the thing, potentially the mechanism of it. But I just find it interesting that a lot of evidence is moving away from cold therapy is genuinely helping, healing and those kind of things for a lot of musculoskeletal injuries. And here we are using it for a brain injury necessarily. That was the thing that kind of made me, I guess, most like dubious to start with. I was like, oh, that seems a bit strange. The cleats to prevent ACL injury. So this I'll go two ways. Like the company once again, like they are killing me, mate. Like on socials, it's like it's being marketed as like this ACL syndesmosis preventer. And a really good follow, and especially on YouTube, if you type in Brien Suterer, I think it's Sutterer, and he does what I do, but 20 times better. He is so good with so many injuries over in the States, particularly with those sports like MMA, those kind of things, NBA, NFL. And he does like YouTube videos, like 6 or 7 minutes. If I had time in my day, you'd love to be able to do what he does, but he does it so well. And he was on Twitter and he's like, look, he directly called out the company and directly called out their medical guy being like, okay, I see these studies that you've given. And the thought behind the cleats is that a big problem with ACLs and high ankle sprains is the traction or the grip between these modern boots and turf, right? So obviously we want lots of grip for performance. We want people to be able to change direction on a dime. But the problem with that is if the foot gets stuck, that force has to go somewhere, and it often goes to the ankle or the knee. And so if those cleats, and by what I understand, the cleats or the studs in these boots have a little bit of movement to them, right? So it's like, does that have a little bit of give? And we talk about all the time, wet weather footy actually being okay, softens the ground, has a little bit of give, helps prevent these injuries. But Dr. Suterer like directly called them out and was like, look, you're saying these things, or it's being said that, it prevents ACL injuries. Do you have any evidence of this? And the doc who is associated with that company, put in a really good reply, right? A really good reply being like, look, no, we don't have any evidence of that. We've got evidence that it does decrease the friction coefficient, or, the friction between the boots and the ground and all that kind of stuff. And it was a really thoughtful reply. And he's like, and so you have to ask yourself, is it worth just wearing it to try? Because you like conceivably boots with a little bit less traction might be really useful for ACL injuries. And like, I couldn't agree more. Like, wonderful thing to try, but when it's being marketed, or the company, because Dr. Suterer like directly called him out, and is like, you guys need to come out and kind of say, hey, look, like there's not evidence of that. They didn't do that. They went and like quote tweeted all these tweets talking about like, oh, ACL prevention and all this kind of stuff. And they're like, yeah, that's us. And I'm like, oh man, this just that's what frustrates me. Is I'm like, you have a product that could be really good. You don't know if it's really good yet, but you just get on the front foot and you do all those things. I just think there's nothing wrong personally with being like, we're trying, but we don't know yet. We're trying really hard and we have a good theory behind it. And this is why we're doing it, but we're yet to have the evidence for it. I don't think there's any problem with that. But I think companies they just take the piss, mate. It's that part is frustrating. But I'm actually really interested in whether this works, if they can have some studies on it and give us some evidence, because I think it makes sense as to whether it would work. It's whether they can replicate that for it to be effective.
The other thing I'm going to add there to wrap this combo up, Ryan, is, if you're someone who's looking at research and looking at, like, how do people come up with these ideas, or, what's scientifically plausible. The problem with scientific plausibility is you can nearly talk your way into anything being possible. So anything can be scientifically plausible, but you've got to have the rigor and the study rigor to back it up. And that's what's really, really important, because and this applies to other professions across the health sphere as well, Brian. There's a million different ways people can talk about what they do and how they do it that makes it scientifically plausible, but you've got to have a bit more in your arsenal to back those things up and substantiate them. So that they've stood up to the scientific rigor over time as well. So I think that's really, really key and really, really important, not only just for physio, but for other stuff outside the physio realm, even though, I'm the first person to say I hate other physios. So, there's that to add on there if you think I'm being biased. Question number 2, Brian. We're talking about Nicho Hynes. Is he still on track to return by round 26? I think NRL.com said about round 26, but Craig Fitzgibbon has been on the record saying he's ahead of schedule, which might be a bit hard to imagine given he's only 7 weeks post syndesmosis and fracture. Was he fibula fracture as well, or tibia fracture too?
Tib, and that's
Tib and
why,
fib. Yeah.
no, only tib, sorry. Not
Only tib, okay.
tib, apparently. So you'd assume it's only like a small fracture, but still, I just think a 7-week return. I agree. I had round 27, even though he's ahead of schedule. I'll put it this way. I don't think he's been dropped in any of my draft leagues. Maybe if you had a spare bench spot for him, but I'm not relying on that at this point in time. I think round 27 is probably going to be, especially with the Knights. Well, once again, they're in and around that top 4 situation, but the win tonight gives them some breathing room again. So I think if they keep winning, I just don't see, personally, I think week 1 of finals would be your ideal for the Sharks, because they give him those extra few weeks. So, but I always had round 27 in my head, and even though Fitzy has said potentially ahead of schedule, that's kind of where I'm at. It sounds like you're pretty similar.
It's a tricky one. They've got Dragons, Warriors, Manly. The Manly one might be deciding the top 4, so I'd probably put him at 27.
Yeah.
As maybe the most likely there, to be honest. I guess the game against the Dragons next week, that's a tough game because it's a local derby. The game is against the Warriors. Who knows which Warriors team's going to get off the bus there. They might be good, they might be horrible. But you've got Manly there in the final round of the season. That may well decide a top 4 finish. That'll be touch and go depending where the Bulldogs are there. So I think that might be the week to watch, Brian. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I totally agree.
All right. Question number 3 was about Cameron Munster. How was he classified as a Category 2 HIA, given that he was lying motionless on the field for, more than 2 minutes? What do you reckon about
that? Mate, after the Morgan Smithies one from a couple of weeks ago, we answer this question relatively similarly every time there's an iteration of it asked. Is that, I'll tell you what the official answer will be, is that in the opinion of the Storm doctor and the opinion of the independent doctor, that there were no clear Category 1 signs shown due to a head injury, or due to a potential concussion. So they may have said he was lying on the ground for 2 to 3 minutes because they were trying to stem the bleeding from his facial wound, or he had a neck injury, or whatever it may be. But I was shocked that he wasn't Category 1. He copped a pretty big whack from Nelson Asofa Solomona's tree trunk forearms, and stayed down. I just think if Morgan Smithies isn't Category 1, then I'm not sure many people beyond Reece Walsh getting knocked unconscious in Origin Category 1. Like the Morgan Smithies one, you'll hear me talk about it a million times. I'll keep talking about it because I still can't get over it. Yeah, and the Munster one wasn't far off it. To be fair, we didn't get a lot of, like, they didn't show a lot of footage of what was happening when he was on the ground as to whether they were looking at his neck or, were they dealing with the cut or what they were doing. So that's the only thing I can think of, but that's the true answer, is that that will be the official answer in terms of like what we think. Like I've been on record as saying I would have gone cat one with a lot of different ones compared to what we've seen at times. So yeah, it's a hard one.
Yeah, it feels like a bit of Control C, Control V on the answers for us this week, Brian, doesn't it? But I think that's just the reality of this situation. We're going to finish on a bit of a lighter note this week, Brian. So, in honour of Sean Johnson retiring, so shout out to Sean Johnson, absolute favourite of ours here on the Magic Sponge. What are your favourite YouTube footy highlights soundtracks from like the early sort of early 2000s here? I've got a few up my sleeve that I'll list off for you, but what are your best footy highlights? That can be NRL or NFL. I'll take here as well as a big NFL enthusiast.
Yeah, mate. My experience here is very much like the SJ, the original SJ Touch one, because I think the only one that's on there now is a remake, and it is to Fort Minor. Remember the name is one of the great. Like, he is the great. I think if you're building a pantheon, it's at the top, right? Like, Fort Minor has to be the number one. But the original one, and this is going back to our like uni days, I reckon, James. Like, this is we're old, so it's a long time ago. But the Roy Jones Jr. Can't Be Touched. I'm not going to sing all these for you, but if you're sitting there on your phone or your computer, just type in Roy Jones Jr. Can't Be Touched. And if you listen to that and you don't want to run through a brick wall, and especially if you're between the ages of like probably 30 and 40, I reckon that's probably your age bracket. Like, that is just such a good psych up song, a fantastic song for highlights reels. Some of my personal favorites, I used to love anything bloody beetroots. You could get some good highlights reels happening there. And then Medeon Finale was a good one. I used to love that as like a techno one. And then the slower one, which is more that like inspirational like build, is the XX intro. Was always a good one. I had to look that one up because I was like, oh, I remember this one that was quite slow, but it always just made you feel real good. And yeah, the XX intro was my favorite. But yeah, can't go past Fort Minor and Roy Jones Jr. They're my two.
I've got a couple of classics, probably a bit more NFL geared, I reckon, Brian, because I was actually just sick for an NFL highlight. So this is right in my wheelhouse, this stuff. So I had Disturbing the Peace and Ludacris Move Bitch. So get out of the way. I had POD Boom. Encore by Linkin Park, remixed with Numb. Like, that is one that absolutely slaps. So you got to get that in and around you. But the other one I really, really like, when people are putting up Twitter snippets or YouTube snippets for NFL specific highlights. I like the ESPN NFL primetime music and the Madden like orchestra music, like just the orchestra backgrounds with like a bit of a twang to it. Like, that sort of stuff just gets me going. I just love like that sort of theme song music a little bit more rather than like the commercial music. Like, I just like that sort of element to add into the mix there as well. And the primetime ESPN stuff is just box office. Like, they have like 2-minute things that they roll into, and there's about 16 of them, and they're all good. Like, when you hear them, you go, oh yeah, I've heard that on ESPN before, because they still trot them out all the time on ESPN, on prime time, on Showtime, on like the before and after games and things like that. It's just the best. That's my favorite stuff.
I love it, mate. We spent a lot of time preparing for the show, obviously, but I reckon I spent about 75% of my prep time going through. I just went down a YouTube rabbit hole of like, just Madden, FIFA, those kind of games. Like, oh man, the soundtracks for those games, the 06, 07, 08, it can't get better. Mate, speaking of can't get better, although not for me, let's not talk about mine. How's your super coach going? What'd you score this week? And I guess with both of us out of trades, but what would you be looking to do if you had trades left?
So this week, Brian was 12.94. I don't know if it's above average or not. It's hard to know. I ran into some scores over 15-30 in some head-to-head games this week, which really sucks for me because I was looking at my score. I was like, oh, that's actually not too bad. But I ran into some scores over 1,500 and I was like, Jesus Christ. So there's some big ones floating out there depending on who you've got in your team setups. I captained Turbo this week, as I think most people probably did. The one regret I have as of this week, Brian, and I'm kicking myself for just doing this, is I went for the missionary sex option of Isaiah Yeo. I could have hit reverse cowgirl by getting Val Holmes in round 21. So people understand what I'm saying when I say that, because what missionary Isaiah Yeo has delivered me since round 21 is 71, 62, 62, 86. Whereas if I hit reverse cowgirl, 104, 136, 56, 145, why was I not stacking into centre wing there, Brian? What was I thinking going with missionary sex with the lights on? I should have lived a bit more on the edge with my final sort of trade. I was weak in second row, so there would have been a week that I would have had to start Bryce Cartwright, but I've left a lot of points on the table there just from those few weeks without having Val on my team. So that's been a huge miss for me this year towards the end of the year. So I'm really, really stinging about that one. I guess for the run home, if I still had trades left to look at, I'd probably still be looking at like the centre wing positions that can hit high. I think Val and Carraz and Zach Lomax have got to be on the menu. I still think Turbo and Ponga are probably not a bad little shout at fullback, even despite Teddy going pretty big this week. The 7 spot becomes very interesting. I actually quite like Matt Burton for the run home at 7. His floor's
Yeah,
fairly
that was going to
reasonable. He's
be
kicking
my
pretty
question to
well.
you. There's going to be a
Yeah.
lot of Cleary owners out there this week. What is your number one move for halfback, do you
I
reckon?
think mine's Burton because I think Hughes will rest in round 27. Whereas I think Burton will play and he'll play well. He does have a pretty good ceiling in him as well, Matty Burton. There's just a vibe around the Bulldogs, though, Brian. I think they're probably not a bad team to have. Burton's going to be part of my mix setup this week as well. It's probably the reason why I sort of lean that way. But I think Matty Burton's not a bad little shout. Like I've got Sam Walker in my setups. You could go that way as well. I probably would like Burton's floor a little bit better than Walker's floor, to be honest. But boy, the Roosters are humming as well. The Bulldogs are humming. I don't think you can go too bad either way there, whichever way it falls. Do you have any preference on the 7 position there, Brian? If you had trades left, where would you look?
Yeah, mate. I think your Burton call's a good one. I definitely go like a Sammy Walker over a Jerome Hughes. Like DCE is not a bad call too.
Yeah.
I think
Daly's there,
Manly,
isn't he?
yeah, Manly have got a pretty good draw as well. I just think, I think Jerome Hughes, as good as he is, and he's been almost my favourite player to watch this year. He's been that good. I mean, he's one of the favourites for the Dally M for good reason. He's just been absolutely killing it. But yeah, I think like it's more like a Sammy Walker, Matt Burton, DCE kind of conversation, especially with the Tigers having, Sea Eagles having the Tigers this week. I think that's a big smash game. Heading into this week, we won't dwell on mine too much. I was 12.25, way below par. I think most of my leagues, people are like 13.50, 400, 1,400 plus. Yeah, just not having Val, Kiraz, and Galvin is just continually hurting me. And mate, Angus Crichton, I've said it once, I'll say it again. He's just absolutely murdering me. So if I had trades this week, that is exactly what I would be doing. I would be getting rid of Cleary and probably getting in DCE would be my thoughts, because I think, once again, DCE probably can't rest because the Seagulls might want to try and sneak into that 4th spot as well. So, yeah, I think DCE would be my play. And if I didn't have, I don't have Turbo, I'd be bringing in Turbo because that man, there's a lot of bad trades to finish the year, but that not bringing him in was the worst one. What'd you do for the mixer, mate? Let's wrap it up before we keep people too long. And what's your plans for next week?
Yeah, good call. 505 for this week. So better week than last week, but still not a stomper. Probably left a few on the table there. It seems like everyone I chose last week went ballistic this week. So I was a week too early on a few people. So my team was Damien Cook, Kennedy Charrington was boosted, Lee Koenig, Nathan Cleary, Isabel Kelly, Tom Trbojevic. So looking at plans for next week, I kind of like DCE versus the Tigers. Tom Trbojevic versus the Tigers is probably not a bad shout either. I do kind of like Burton versus the Warriors, though, to be honest, to replace Cleary. I think Burton might get a little bit more maybe than DC. I'm not too sure about that one. I think that's a bit of a coin flip type situation in the NRLW setup here, Brian. So I think you just got to get Kennedy Charrington, Georgia Hale or Simon Tower. Like, you just got to have one of those three in your mid positions. Isabel Kelly or Melly Hufunga. Melly Hufunga's got the Tigers next week, who are the leakiest defensive team at centre wing. I know she didn't get across the line this week and only scored 30 this week, but she put up 112 the week before, 117. Like, she's got a game in her, and if she can just get to the try line, she might be worth a play. I kind of like the thought of Tegan Berry, though. She's been so good at fullback, Brian. Like, she's nearly the alpha fullback to own in the NRLW competition as it stands. Her average has been ridiculous. She has scored a lot of tries, but she just is always going to score tries. She's a notable try scorer. She's got absolute jets. I think she looks like the business week in and week out. I'm pretty tempted to go Tegan Berry at fullback and then look for a male in a different position there, to be honest. So I think I'll probably take a half as a male this week. And then I'll probably look at maybe even getting like a second row forward in this week as a male rather than Olivia Koenig. So I might go maybe Tegan Berry at fullback, probably Isabel Kelly at centre. I think Burton probably in the halves for me as it stands, and probably find someone on the edge there with a good matchup as a guy. Go to a mid as a female and go Damien Cook there to wrap it up, I reckon, will be probably the way I set up my team.
I like it, mate. 470 for me. I think my lesson this week is don't be an idiot and just go with Isabel Kelly. Once Jess Sergis got ruled out, I was like, Funga went so well last week. Everyone else will go Isabel Kelly. I'll go Funga there. That cost me 70 points, 60 points, 70 points. Yeah, just not good. So I had Damien Cook. I boosted Hale, Olivia Koenig, DCE, Hufanga, and Turbo boosted. So I think, bringing in Kelly next week. I like Cook. He's just killing it at hooker. So I'm pretty happy to kind of keep him there. And then Georgia Hale, as I said, there might be a few coming back for the Titans in the next few weeks. So potentially, but I think like until she proves otherwise, like she is just an absolute beast. So I think I'm probably going to stick with her. But I like your Tegan Berry at fullback. I think even outside of a mixer standpoint, like Tegan Berry, just from a real life standpoint, I've really loved watching her play. She just is so silky smooth. It's one of those people who doesn't look like an effort to run. Like, I love watching players like that where it's just so natural for them. So yeah, she is absolutely killing it at the moment. So I like that call. But yeah, I think just go Isabel Kelly. Don't double think yourself. I think I've drifted out. I was 90th in our league last week. I'm up into the hundreds now, early hundreds. But look, I think just go to Kelly and ride her in. I've just got a question from one of the patrons asking about Wade Egan, who is someone we did not talk about. They might not last till all the way at the end, but I will say that Wade Egan with his elbow, they're asking, is his season over? It's unlikely, especially with him being named initially and then ruled out late. It's probably something that he's looking. Well, it depends how, the Warriors just shut him down just because, but ideally, I think he should be able to return physically at some point. It's just whether they shut him down. Sorry to interrupt our mixer chat. Love the mixer. But mate, that's it for this week. As always, if you like the pod, give us a review, recommend to a friend, all those wonderful things. Patreon.com/NRL Physio is your place to go. James, have a good week. I was speaking to my wife early today. I forgot to talk to you off air about it, but may as well do it now. We might be doing grand final night together this year, which would be
all
fun.
Right.
So we can try and do like a live Magic Sponge record after a few beverages on grand final night, and hopefully celebrating a Bronx Finns grand final somehow from 7th and 8th in the ladder, and away we go.
Yeah, there'll be the droobliest episode of all time if it's me and you after the grand final. My God, I'd hate to think.
I love it. All right, guys, have a good week. And as always, up the mighty, mighty Redcliffe Dolphins.